So here's the reality. Cameras have gotten much more expensive lately. And a lot of camera companies are starting to focus so much more on their premium offerings, on professional features, on full frame and, crazy stabilization and raw recording and all of these impressive features for professionals. But that means there's not a lot of new options out there that offer true value for an entry level market. A lot of times when we're talking about entry level cameras, you wind up having to make big, difficult sacrifices that will significantly limit your ability to not only learn on the camera and use some of the more advanced features, but also to go from somebody that's a new hobbyist photographer to a professional. Except for this one. This is the Canon R10, and it is a truly entry-level camera, both in price point as well as feature set, but also offers incredible value. And I think it's one of the best options out there, either for budget-conscious photographers and filmmakers, or new photographers that want to learn the craft and master it before they become professionals. So let's talk about this camera and why I think it's one of the best entry-level cameras you can buy. Let's start with this. What makes a truly entry-level camera? Well, one is going to be the price point. It's got to be something that's relatively affordable. Now, this camera comes in at around $1,000 brand new, and you can pick it up just for the body for around $700 to $800 used, which is not what I would consider a cheap camera, but it is at a price point that is far below what a lot of other offerings come at. And in my opinion, I think it also needs to be highly usable, meaning that you can pick it up and shoot incredible photos, and you can also pick it up and shoot incredible videos as well. It should offer features that are good enough for somebody to learn on and figure out the craft, while having advanced enough features that you could do some professional work on it. All right, let's talk about some specifications real quick. The R10 features a 24 megapixel APS-C size sensor using Canon's mirrorless RF mount. So it can use all of the most modern mirrorless lenses as well as be adapted to older EF mount lenses as well. Now, one thing to mention about Canon's APS-C size sensor is that it has a 1.6x crop factor, whereas a lot of other manufacturers like Sony have a 1.5x crop factor. ISO ranges from 100 to 32,000 and can be expandable up to 52,300, which, as far as expandable ISO ranges, might not be as high as some other offerings. But to be fair, expanded ISO is not really a measurement that you should compare cameras with, because there's no real reason you should ever use an ISO that high. Even 32,000, I think you'll find noise is going to be quite unbearable on a small sensor like this. Now let's talk about autofocus real quick, because with Canon cameras, that is always going to be a big talking point and a big selling point as well. And this camera really shines in that regard, especially in delivering value. For the sub $1,000 price point, you will get Canon's latest dual pixel autofocus program, as well as 651 phase detect autofocus points. This makes autofocus incredibly fast and accurate and does an excellent job of locking onto subjects, and more specifically, locking onto human eyes. We'll talk a little bit more about the autofocus performance later on. In video shooting, it can do up to 4K 60, but that does come with an additional 1.56x crop. So it is going to make doing wider shots quite difficult. One really nice thing though is that there is no crop to shoot 4K at 30 frames per second and 1080p at 120 frames per second. So you can use all the width of your lens when you are shooting at those frame rates, which at this price point does offer some pretty significant value. One thing that I was slightly disappointed to see, but didn't surprise me very much considering the price point, was the lack of IBIS. There is no stabilization in camera on this body. Although if you are using a lens with optical image stabilization, that can help smooth things out a little bit. If you are shooting moving video, you are going to be better off using this camera on a gimbal or some kind of a stabilizer, or just opting for more static shots like this one. Some really nice to have features that you are going to get with the Canon R10 is a fully articulating touchscreen LCD that is lacking a little bit in brightness if I am going to be honest, but is nice and responsive and does make controlling the camera quite nice. It makes it a nice little feature for vloggers as well, so that you can see yourself when you are recording yourself. You also get a built-in flash, which actually is a feature that you really don't see very much anymore. Now, the last nice to have that I'm going to mention is this grip. It makes the camera very ergonomically comfortable. As you can see, for a relatively light and compact camera, it does have a really nice and deep hand grip. And while the grip itself is a little bit on the thinner side, so if you have larger hands, you may still find yourself feeling a little bit uncomfortable, and it does not leave you a ton of room between the grip and the lens. So if you have like big fingers, you may wind up just brushing up against the lens all the time. But it's really nice and ergonomic, and especially for such a light camera, it makes holding this camera for a long time very, very easy, both in portrait or landscape mode. Honestly, I feel comfortable walking around with this camera without even a strap or anything, just holding it using the hand grip, because as you can see, it's very solid. All right, let's talk about the shooting experience with this camera, because that's going to be something that's very important, especially for beginners. It is a very easy camera to simply pick up and go. You can grab this right out of the box and start shooting right away without messing with any settings whatsoever. The controls are nice and intuitive. You do get two adjustment wheels, one on top of your index finger and one by your thumb. You get a multitude of custom buttons, and you also get a nice touchscreen interface that you can use to help control your camera. But the biggest thing that makes this camera so easy to use right out of the box is the autofocus performance. The first thing you're going to notice when you start shooting with it is how quickly it locks onto human faces. Canon and Sony have always been back and forth in the who has the best autofocus argument over the past few years. But even though I've shot Sony professionally for many, many years, every time I pick up a newer generation Canon, I am so blown away by the autofocus performance. Now, one thing that I have seen other people report about the R10 specifically is the subject recognition. While it does incredibly well with human faces, other people have reported that it has a hard time recognizing animals. Now, I tested it with my cat and a couple of animals at a food truck festival, and I didn't find that it was noticeable. But to be fair, I'm not a wildlife photographer and I have not put it through its paces. The thing that I've heard the most is that with birds specifically, it has a hard time recognizing and locking onto eyes. So if you are someone that's planning on shooting wildlife exclusively, that may be a bit of a concern for you. But if you want the versatility to shoot landscapes, people, animals, and everything in between, the autofocus does perfectly fine, and it really excels with people. Now, 24 megapixels is enough resolution for most applications, even in today's day and age. It's going to give your photos plenty of detail for digital delivery and even enough for some small to medium-sized printing. 24 megapixels was the standard for a lot of cameras for a long, long time. So just because there are offerings out there, maybe at slightly higher but not too far off price points with higher resolution, doesn't necessarily mean 24 megapixels is suddenly not enough. In addition to that, 4K is plenty for most video deliveries as well. When it comes to image performance, Canon's colors are well known and well regarded, especially for having a very natural look on human skin tones. It does tend to be a little bit less punchy and a little bit flatter looking than some other cameras like maybe a Sony. And I actually have a video comparing Sony to Canon colors that's going to be coming out soon after this review, so make sure you're subscribed to check that one out as well. But whether you're shooting JPEGs or RAWs on this camera, you're going to find there's plenty of color to work with and there's plenty of resolution to work with, and that autofocus is going to make shooting so incredibly seamless and easy that you're just going to enjoy using this camera. Now, when it comes to shooting photos, there are some downsides that I do have to mention. One is the lack of IBIS. Now, on a camera of this price point and on an entry-level camera, that is often something that you are going to have to make a sacrifice for. Very few cameras that are at $1,000 price point, brand new, mind you, not used, but brand new, will offer you IBIS. And so the reality is that's a feature that's becoming much more of a premium or professional camera feature. It does make shooting handheld a bit of a challenge, especially at some of the longer focal lengths. If you take a look at some of these sample photos that I took at the food truck festival, you'll notice that they are a little bit blurry. Now, I was shooting at 105 millimeters on a full frame lens, which on this camera is about 168 to 170 millimeter full frame equivalent. So very much a telephoto focus. focal length. But I was shooting at 1/200th of a second. And even then, because there's no stabilization whatsoever, at 1/200th of a second, the photos did come out half blurry and half sharp. You do have to do a pretty good job of stabilizing with both of your hands if you are going to be shooting at a longer distance like that, or you're going to have to shoot at very high frame rates, but that's usually going to require you to shoot at a much higher ISO, causing a lot of noise. Okay, so the photo performance is damn good, and the autofocus performance is incredible in photos as well. Let's talk about the videos now. Now, when it comes to video performance, the Canon R10 packs pretty much everything you would ever need, but it doesn't go much more beyond that. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. On an entry-level camera, honestly, that's more than you will get with most other entry-level cameras. Just the fact that it has 4K 60, even though it has 4K 60 with a 1.56x crop, which is quite hefty, it's nice to have. And there are very few options out there that are at a similar price point that actually even offer 4K 60 at all. In fact, a lot of other offerings around similar price points limit you to 4K 30 with a crop on its own. The Canon R10, however, lets you do 4K 30 without a crop, and it even lets you do 1080p 120 without a crop as well. And that is incredible value. But one thing that is, again, quite a bit of a downside is the lack of IBIS. When shooting video, it does make a much more significant difference, and it's much more noticeable, especially if you are not using a tripod or some kind of stabilizer. It does also exhibit quite a bit of rolling shutter as well, and that's not helped by the lack of IBIS. But here's the thing. Those are all very easy things for you to work around, and quite frankly, that's the reality of an entry-level camera. You're going to have to work around some of the limitations because you don't get the pro-level features. You don't get all of the research and development put into reducing rolling shutter, and you don't get fancy IBIS with fancy algorithms. So you'll probably have to shoot most of your shots relatively static or with some kind of a stabilizer. One thing that is really impressive about the video performance of the R10 is the autofocus performance. If you check out this video of my review of the Canon RP, one of my biggest complaints about that camera was the fact that it is touted as a hybrid camera. It boasts 4K video shooting features, but the autofocus is incredibly bad. It's almost unusable. The R10, however, has equally good autofocus performance in both photo and video. It uses Canon's latest dual pixel autofocus 2 in both photo and video, and it does an incredible job in video of locking on to human subjects, of locking onto eyes, and even animals. And because you have that touchscreen, it's really easy to lock onto one specific subject, and it actually does stay locked on really, really well. It's incredibly fast, it's incredibly responsive, and when you do lock the focus onto something, it really does stay locked. So, in conclusion, the Canon R10 is a true value camera. At a $1,000 price point for the body, or $700 to $800 in the used market, you get a lot for your money. And it is a true beginner's camera. The Canon R10 really combines what I think are some of the most important features for beginners in a very usable, comfortable, and affordable camera that is going to give you plenty of room to not only learn, but grow into some professional work as well. So here's the thing. $1,000 for a camera is not exactly cheap, but the reality is there's not a lot of cheap cameras out there that you can get brand new. There are plenty of cheap cameras that are used, but you'll likely have to give up a lot of the features that you're getting on the R10. There's this thing that people tend to do when it comes to expensive things that always irks me a little bit, and that's calling them investments. Influencers out there will tell you that you should buy the $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 camera as your first camera because it's an investment and it's going to give you all of that room to do professional work later on. But oftentimes, calling something an investment doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get more value out of it than you put in. Because that's the true definition of an investment, right? Your goal is to get more value out of that thing than you bought it for. And if you spend $6,000 right off the bat as your first camera, it might take you a decade to recoup that investment. Here's the thing though. This camera, the Canon R10, I genuinely think is an investment. It is not the cheapest camera out there. It is not the most feature-packed entry-level camera out there. But it has everything you need, not only for you to learn, but also to take you into professional work as well. It's so easy to use, and the quality of what you're going to shoot on it is so good that you can use it for professional client work. And at its relatively low price point compared to professional cameras, if your goal is to learn photography or filmmaking and to become a professional, by not spending a ton of money on your first camera and getting a camera like this that offers you a lot of value and packs a punch, you're gonna be able to recoup that investment much quicker than if you just went ahead and bought a $6,000 professional camera to begin with. And that is where I think the true value of the Canon R10 is. All right, that's pretty much it. Those are my thoughts on the Canon R10. If you have this camera, I'd love to hear in the comments down below what your thoughts on it are. If you found this video helpful, please hit that like button. If you want to see more photography related content like this, please hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next one.